Hi everyone, my name's Terence and I'm 17 years old. I depend on one girl so much that I stole for her. Let me tell you one thing at a time. 6 months ago, I met a girl named Elizabeth on Instagram. Of course, at first I only saw her Instagram page, but she was incredibly beautiful in her pictures. She's 17 too, and she lives a couple blocks away. I like these coincidences, and I talked to her for a week and realized that we had a lot in common. For example, we both thought I was a great guy, and most importantly, a good friend. This is my way of telling you guys that she totally had friend-zoned me. It was a shame, but regardless, I believed that it was necessary to fight for a girl, so I continued to talk to her, hoping for something more. I wrote to her often, but she ignored most of my messages. Elizabeth didn't tell me what happened to her parents, but she lived with her grandmother. According to her stories, they never had much money, and over time, things got even worse. At some point, her grandmother started having heart problems, and most of their money was spent on medicine. Then it wasn't just new things that Elizabeth couldn't afford, but also food. I wouldn't say that I was happy about this situation, but it helped me come up with a cool idea for how to help Elizabeth and myself, and even her grandmother. I asked Elizabeth to date me for money, $20 per date. I know what you're thinking. Sounds strange, but I was tired of just seeing her online. She had doubts, but when I made it clear that I did not expect for her to have any feelings for me, and that I could only hope for them to appear, she agreed. So, we started dating. This is one of those times where a girl is even more beautiful in real life than in her Instagram pictures. I was glad to see that I'd finally gotten the opportunity to meet her in person, but unfortunately, our dates were very weird. Elizabeth felt like she was at work. I took her to the movies and cafes and gave her little gifts, but it was all in vain. Of course, I was very upset. My money was going to run out at some point. A week passed and there was still no results. One day, after watching a movie with my parents, I had another idea. In the movie, a frail man, just like me, beat up a bad guy who insulted his girlfriend and won her heart. And the whole situation had been set up by this guy in the movie. I decided to do something similar. One night, when I was walking Elizabeth home, the bad boy, played by my friend Jason, began to harass us. Everything looked very realistic, the harassment and the fight. So the plan worked. When Jason ran away in terror from my strong fists, Elizabeth was very impressed, and she even kissed me on the cheek. And even though I was really happy, that kiss ended up not really changing anything. I stopped caring about classes and spent all day trying to figure out how to make Elizabeth fall in love with me. At some point, I decided to ask my father for some advice. I became interested how he had won my mother's heart. It turned out that they had experienced a similar situation, except for the money aspect, of course. My mother also did not want to be with him for a long time, but according to him, everything changed after a magic kiss. When she was about to blow him off again, he just kissed her on the lips, and then it all started to spin. And at that moment, I thought, so this is what I've been missing. I thanked my father for his advice and went over to Elizabeth's house a couple of hours later. I want to clarify. At that time, the idea money equals dates was firmly stuck in my head. So on one of our dates, instead of doing it unexpectedly or romantically, I just asked how much she would expect for kissing me on the lips. I'm still surprised I didn't get slapped in the face for asking. But apparently, she was also used to me paying for everything, so she offered her price. It was $500. Man, I really wanted to kiss her, and I really wanted to be with her, but $500 was just out of my budget. It was too awkward to ask her for a discount on this, but I could definitely have used one. Anyway, I assured myself that this kiss, as my dad said, would change everything. I had some savings, of course, which I used to pay for Elizabeth and I on our dates, but by then, it was almost gone. That's when I remembered my parents' savings. They kept most of their money in a bank account, but I knew for sure that they had some in their drawer in their room. And they also don't look in there very often. I decided to steal it for the sake of love, especially since I was still going to put the money back after I get a job. So when my parents were not at home, I looked in that box and saw that there was much more than I needed. But I obviously only took $500. I closed the drawer and made it look like I'd never been there. And then I ran to Elizabeth. I was so excited about the kiss that I almost fell as I was running. When I met her, I gave her the money, and the truth hit me. I had already kissed girls before, but this time, I'll remember those 10 seconds for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, as you may have already realized, it was only amazing for me. Elizabeth's face showed almost no emotion after the kiss, but at that moment, I was still fooling myself that everything would change. After the kiss, we went for a walk. I reached out to kiss her goodbye, but she didn't want to kiss me again. When I got home, my parents were in some kind of fight. As far as I could tell, Mum suspected that my dad had a mistress. They were screaming, but to be honest, I didn't really get into it because I had enough of my own drama. But the worst was yet to come. Elizabeth and I went out less often because, as I said, my savings were gone. Surprisingly, over time, I began to think about her less, but unfortunately, not enough time had passed for me to forget her completely. One day, when I was walking with my friend Jason, my friend who played the bad guy in our fight, I noticed Elizabeth at a cafe with some guy. I was not about to jump to conclusions. You never know who it could be, but at the same moment I went inside to say hello, she kissed him. I instantly forgot that I was with Jason. I felt dizzy. I thought it was only girls who got sick from love, but as it turns out, that's not true. Elizabeth saw me and took me aside to talk. Basically, she told me what I was afraid to admit. I listened, with tears in my eyes, when she said that the guy she kissed was her real boyfriend, and she only sees me as a friend that pays her to hang out with him. Why didn't I end it after the kiss that didn't lead to anything? It would have been so much easier. But there in the cafe, and being so shocked and extremely jealous, I did something stupid. I asked her how much money she would need to leave her boyfriend, and finally love me for real, without paying for dates and kisses. I was so naive to think that I could buy love for money. She said she wanted $3,000, and as far as I understood, if I could not pay it, I was supposed to just leave her alone. But I was ready to act. I told her to wait for me in that cafe, and she grinned and agreed, and sat back down with her boyfriend. I ran home to get the money. My parents were at home but in the kitchen, so I managed to quietly sneak into their room for the money. I quickly counted $3,000 and left, but not before covering my tracks. When I returned to the cafe with the money, Elizabeth was shocked. She thought I might have done something illegal to get the money, but she didn't ask about it. And maybe it was just because of the money, or maybe it was because she saw what I was willing to do for her, but she broke up with that guy. After that, we had a great date. She knew that I no longer had any money, so she paid for me everywhere we went. It surprised me, because she'd never done this before. I was just so happy that I blindly believed that everything would change. What a jerk I am. My problems continued, and my parents noticed that the money was gone. When I got home, my mother asked me if I'd taken the money. Of course, I was afraid, so I said no, but my mother believed me. Her main suspect was my dad. Ever since she'd been paranoid about him having a mistress, she'd been suspicious of him. Well, the disappearance of $3,500 confirmed her vision. Dad also wondered where the money had gone and asked me several times about it, but I just shook my head. So a week passed, and they were fighting all the time. But I was hoping that I'd have enough time to get a job, earn the money, and put it back as if nothing had happened. To be honest, I don't know what I was thinking at the time. I'm a complete idiot. You might have already guessed, but my love story was over as fast as that $3,000 ran out. We basically dated for a week after that, but then she broke up with me. The dumbest thing is that I was surprised by what happened back then. I will never get tired of calling myself a naive fool. But the story with my parents wasn't over yet. After they could not find the reason for the disappearance of the money, my mother accused my father of spending it on a mistress, and they decided to get a divorce. At that moment, my conscience was fully awake, and I confessed. Of course, my parents were very angry that I almost drove them to divorce, and that I stole their money. They did not kick me out of the house, but they said that they would no longer help me financially. And of course, that I should get a job and pay back all the money I had taken. That's my story.